I'm really happy to have a bestseller author from the United States, exactly from Seattle, in my show. Hello, Alvin W. Graylin, and I'm happy to have you here. And you have, you have published recently or right now your book. And would you please tell us what motivated you and your co-author? Your co-author is Louis Rosenberg to write this book.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I enjoyed meeting you and chatting with you in Austin, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Um, so I think the key for us was, well, actually, I kind of started with the idea because I really have been following this for over 33 years. I first studied XR and AI in 1991, and have seen the ups and downs of this in of both industries over that period. And what appeared to me a couple of years ago is that we're getting to a real inflection point in both of these technologies converging at the same time and reinforcing a technology wave that's coming to hit this society. And it's going to create changes that at a scale and at a pace that society is not able to withstand. And I wanted to, I guess, kind of bring up the warning flag that, hey, this is coming and we need to do something about it. Not because it's completely bad, and actually because it has a potential to do good. And that if we don't do anything, there's a likely potential we'll actually head down the same path that we did with social media and other technologies that went south. But if we made the right choices and if the policymakers did the right regulations in the near term and the company leaders made the right decisions in terms of how to manage the transition, then I think we can actually end up in a very, very positive place after this new technology wave comes. So that's why I'm actually very excited because I really feel like this message needs to get out, and the timing couldn't be any better because, as you know, this year we just had the Apple Vision Pro. This device just launched, and it's bringing again attention to the XR space, whereas the last year and a half, 2 years, the AI space has been very, very hot. And before that, there was the whole metaverse thing with Facebook Meta that really hyped up that technology, be kind of a little bit before it was ready. So the combination of these things happening, I think, makes it where now people can see, yes, the messages in the book have potential to actually be realized, and we need to do something about it to make sure that we bend it towards a positive outcome. So that's what a long answer to your question.
But what you have shown right now, the Apple device, what will change? What kind of change we will see in the coming years? What kind of breakthroughs do you anticipate? Because you know that Figure 1 or Figure AI was released, and I read a lot of books that it is impossible that robots can handle an apple because they do not have the sense to take it and to give it to somebody else. And now it's pretty normal. What is going on right now?
Yeah, so I guess there's kind of multiple areas of progress. There's the headset, right? So we're going from what we just showed, which is something like this, to right now, a year ago, actually, the HTC launched a product that look like this, right? So it's more like glasses, 200 grams. That one was the Vision Pro is around 600 grams. And very soon we will get to devices like this that are 30, 40, 50 grams, which you can wear all day. And from a device on your head perspective, it is becoming more comfortable. And actually, this is my daily wear glasses right now. I wear it, 8, 10, 15 hours a day. And it's capable, and it has electronics and cameras and microphones in it. Within another actually next month I'm getting a new device that has a display in it from a company called Brilliant Labs. So from a headset perspective, we are getting closer and closer to I guess what people had envisioned in terms of a comfortable display device. Now, from the AI perspective, we've also seen tremendous improvements over the last 15 years as deep learning started to become something very viable. And it's, the capabilities that we thought were not possible before when we were focused on pure programming. Or expert systems-based solutions, because of the limitations of human knowledge and rules, now can be resolved because we're able to train and have machines train itself, right? Especially after the 2017 Transformer paper. Now, I think what you just mentioned in terms of the robotics side is also another area of progress. And I know everybody's seen the Boston Robotics robots, the ones that can do parkour and everything, but those were teleoperated. There were humans running these machines, and maybe they have to run 100 times for them to shoot that video, right? What we're getting to now is that these machines are training themselves just like the AI systems. And they are also now integrating with the large language models so that or the large multimodal models actually, so that they actually have vision capabilities, and they also have understanding and world models in them, so that they can respond like what you said with the Figure device or the Figure robot. Now, Figure actually, isn't the first one to talk about this. I mean, it's been in discussion for a while, and there are multiple companies that are doing humanoid robots. I think Tesla bot probably even a little bit more famous than the Figure robot. And about maybe 3-4 weeks ago, they did a similar demo, but that demo was just a video of the machine doing things. It wasn't as interactive. So I think the Figure robot really showed that now you can integrate the AI interaction with humans directly into it, whereas the Tesla one was showing picking up an egg and moving the egg. So similar types of capabilities, and actually the dexterity of the hand of the Tesla robot may be even in some ways better than what the Figure one had. So I think and then now I think Unitree from in China has one. Xiaomi also has one. Dream has one. I think there's Kepler. So there's probably 6 or 7 companies in the world right now that are all making humanoid robots. In fact, today I wore this shirt just for you because I know you're going to ask me about robots.
So you are a robot, or you are a human person? I'm talking
I am a person. But the thing is, these tests that we've been having online now actually can be solved by AI. So the picking different blocks is no longer a challenge for AI. So I think very soon we will not having these type of tests anymore. So,
but pretty new is for me pretty new is like Devon. I think Devon is its name, Devon AI. That the things are programming it by themselves. That there are bots and they talk to each other. Then you have some problems, and the bots talk about the problems, and then they improve the systems. And so you do not need any more programmers, for example. I think in 1 year, nobody talks anymore about programmers. And so we have a lot of luck because it's cheaper to program. But on the other hand, you have one profession you do not need anymore.
Yeah, well, I think we don't want to jump to conclusions too much, because if you read the paper that they put out, it's actually only about 15% of programming tests that they were running, they were able to run independently with this robot, with the Devon system. Now, that's probably 10 times better than what Claude and GPT-4 was doing before when they were running these same tests. So significantly better. But it still means that there's 85% of human run tasks that cannot be replaced by this. But the fact that it's able to do the iterative debugging and looking for solutions and coming back and trying to do that planning and problem solving, that was something that we hadn't seen before, right? What we did see before with other LLMs was the ability to the prompt was given by the programmer, code was then generated, and then the human would then take the code, insert it into the program, run it, and do its own testing. So now it's able to automate that into an iterative process so that it becomes a combination of the logic as well as the action model. So I think that's what's new about it. In fact, I think underneath of Devon is actually one of the large language, might actually be GPT-4 is probably underneath of it. Now, what that also means, the benefit of that is that when GPT-5 comes out, or when Claude 4 comes out, or when Llama 6 comes out, whatever, it will automatically get better, right? So Devin isn't trying to be the perfect programmer. It's trying to be the integration system on top of the GPT level to allow the interactive and iterative process of programming.
Mm-hmm. But there will be a lot of change, and there will be a lot from new things, new jobs, but other jobs you won't see anymore, especially too in the communication field, in the design field, and so on. And you have published a list, I think it was from OpenAI, and there were a lot of jobs, they were fading away, and they were really hit by the new technology. So tell us, which role will immersive tech metaverse play in our future, and what mistakes people are making today that will accelerate coming problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the misunderstandings most people have is that, oh, AI is just going, or AI and robotics is just going to replace the manual labor. That's always been the case for the prior generations of innovation. But what we're seeing now with the new generation of AI, actually the first type of labor to be replaced, to be displaced, will actually be more the intellectual labor, the cognitive labor, because the cognitive AI is actually more advanced than robotics today, right? So if you're doing repetitive tasks like in a factory, those machines, robots are fine. And Germany actually makes some of the best robots, but they are single task type of activities. When you get into a complex environment, a dynamic environment, most robots are not able to do it. Now, with these new AI systems, they are actually now, because they've trained on all the information that we have on the internet and a lot of private data, they have a very complete model of what the world is, and is able to respond across various industries, from being a lawyer to a counselor to a accountant to whatever, right? In fact, last year I had to review some legal documents, and instead of calling a lawyer to do it, which would have cost me $700, I fed it into GPT, and it came back with advice that said, "Oh, and here are the things that on this contract that you should be concerned about." I marked those contracts, sent it back to the lawyer of that company, and they said, "Oh, actually, those were the points I told them not to put in, because I didn't think they were actually fair points." And so, when you prompt the GPT to work for you, it can actually service you in a lot of ways. So in some ways, these junior lawyers that used to review contracts, they're not needed. And things like accountants, which just look at forms and numbers, they're not needed. They will be replaced much faster than the programmers will be, because there's still a lot more dynamic nature to programming. But I think most of these repetitive cognitive labor will be displaced very quickly, and much more quickly than most people expect, and then the society can withstand, right? In fact, I was chatting with a partner at one of the major accounting firms. I won't say which one, but she was so worried. She was like, "Oh, we have 5,000 people in this office. How am I going to afford to keep them if this AI is doing all the things that we're seeing that's happening?" And the junior lawyers and the junior accountants really are quite concerned. So and rightfully so.
Are we still in the AI world, or are we already in the AGI world?
I know the term AGI is being bantered around a lot. I don't think we are there yet. Some actually, last week when Devin came out, a lot of people said, "Oh, this is the first AGI because it's able to program and debug itself." I think that the ability to adjust and program and train yourself is actually one of the most important steps to getting us to AGI, but itself is not AGI. So it is a predecessor to enabling that to happen, because actually, if you look at the software development world, the average programmer maybe programs something like tens of lines a day. If you look at a whole year, tens of lines a day of productive code that they can actually ship. right? They may write a lot more, but they have to debug, they have to wait, they have to talk to their other developer friends or teammates. So the productivity of humans is actually very, very limited. Whereas a AI system can be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and at probably tens to hundreds of lines per second. So if it's able to code itself and at that rate, if it's able to improve itself at that rate, very soon we will get from the current level of AI to the next level of AGI. And depending on which expert you listen to, it's anywhere between the next 6 months to the next, maybe 10 years. Even the pessimistic researchers today are probably saying 10 years. Just 2 years ago, the researchers were saying, 30, 40, 50 years away. Right. So the fact that it's come down, 3, 4, 5x in just a couple of years in terms of where the top end of the range is quite amazing. Yeah, and so I think we definitely are not far away from AGI, but we are not there yet. And once we get to AGI, then we will very quickly get to ASI, because
but before we go there,
artificial, yeah,
tell us artificial superintelligence, right? Or how do you spell it? ASI.
Yes, artificial superintelligence, exactly.
Yeah. But could you explain what is AGI for you? What is different from AI to right now for you? What is a definition? What everybody can understand?
Yeah, so let's kind of go to the beginning a little bit. Initially, it was essentially procedural programs is what we kind of started with. Humans put in a prompt that says, if this happens, then do this, right? Then we got to expert systems where you get humans with a certain expertise. You put in all the possible potentials of things that they know and the potentialities, and then the reactions. Right? And in the last 15 years, it's been more more data driven, so more machine learning, where essentially you feed in a bunch of data and let the machine find its own patterns. But every time you do it, you train it and it's fixed. It's stopped, right? Just like right now, if you use ChatGPT and you say, what data are you up to? And it will say, up to March of 2022 or 2023 or something. So it only knows up to that amount of time. What we need to get to is a system where it's training on all the information out there, but it's also able to improve itself in real time, or at least in some amount of constancy. Whereas today it takes a human to go then retrain it, which maybe cost tens of millions of dollars or more to retrain that system, and then you fine tune it, and then you release it, and then somebody uses it for a while, and then you go to the next version, right? That's very kind of granular types of improvements. What we will get to is essentially the ability to be as intelligent as any human on Earth, and to be able to learn by itself, so that when it encounters new information, new problems, it's able to analyze, find information, self-improve, and then come up with its own solutions. Some people think that AGI has to have embodiment. So, we were talking about these humanoid robots. I'm not sure that's the case. I think because you have humans that are, very general capabilities, that are blind, that are immobile, but they are still general AIs, right? If you ask them problems, they can think about problems and they would tell you. So you have quadriplegics. You have people like Stephen Hawkins, who is clearly a general intelligent person, but he's immobile. Right. So I don't think we need to have that embodiment, but what we will have is the ability to feed in multimodal data, feed in videos, feed in sound, feed in 3D models, feed in all the libraries, the information in all the books in the world. That allows that device or that system to know as much as all of humankind knows. And when that happens, I think automatically we will get very close to that. And the fact that the last 6 months to a year, actually multimodal models are actually now becoming a thing. Before that, it was really language models, right? So essentially, we were training a blind child that had no mobility and no hearing, and no ability to sense anything else except for text. And even with that limited amount of sensory information, it was able to build a world model and answer questions and be able to create it can create a description of how to paint a picture, even though it's never seen a picture, right? So now that you actually give it the picture, now you give it the video, now you give it the physics models, now you actually tie it into mathematics systems that it can go and use as a tool, it will become essentially superhuman, right? I think that's when people talk about AGI, that at least that's my definition, is an ability to be as good as any human and to be able to improve and learn from your environments and the problem sets that you're looking at. And once you have the ability to self-improve, you will get to what we talked about earlier, which was the ASI.
Okay, well, let's continue later on with ASI. But what do you think the AGI? When will we see the AGI? What do you think? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? You are an expert. You are.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a very debatable point, because the problem is that anytime we get to a certain thing that people would say, oh, that's AGI, the goalpost moves, right? If you look at 10 years ago, if you said, oh, I could have this chatbot, I can put in anything, it can write programs, it can solve problems, it can do logic, is that AGI? And most experts in the space would be, oh yeah, that's AGI. But now it's just a chatbot. Right.
Yeah,
now I say, well, what if it can make videos and pictures and 3D models? Would that make it AGI? And probably 5 years ago, people were like, oh, that's AGI.
Yeah.
Look, it can. So we keep moving the goalposts. I think the ability to self-improve, I think that changes everything. And that's, I think, coming because of what you just said with Devin. When you have a AI system that can start to train its own models and say, oh, I just found a mistake, or I found a limitation in certain data, or I found that this tuning parameter was wrong. Let me redo that, and I'll retrain it overnight, and now I'm slightly improved, better than I was yesterday. When that happens, I think we will get to AGI very soon. And my perspective is that given how much money and compute and data that we are throwing at it, and human intelligence that we are throwing at it, it should happen the beginning of AGI in the next 1 to 2 years, maybe 2 to 3 years, I would say is probably on the high end. But that's my personal opinion. Some people are saying 2030 is probably the conservative people are probably saying 2030. So
but I've seen a lot of experts, especially right now in Austin, from Amazon, for example. They say when we trained the machines, we were astonished that they could do much more than we have expected. They are already astonished that, okay, I thought it will happen in 2 years and 3 years, but it came now. Do you see the same thing?
Absolutely. I mean, if you follow what's going on in industry, every week, sometimes every day, there are new papers released that I was like, wow, I thought that would take longer. I thought that would take another few years to get to. And boom, we're able to get there. Now we're having, multi-million parameter models. Just a couple of years ago, we were at a few hundred or a few thousand parameters that you can put in for a context window, or a few thousand tokens. Right now you're able to put in multi-million tokens. I can feed in an entire book. I can feed in an entire library soon, and have that as the question for this system. I can now, it's now got emergent capabilities to do math and science that people didn't really train it to do. It has the theory of mind of understanding the listener's perspective, even though it was never trained to do these things. It has the capability to translate hundreds of languages, even though it was never trained to do these things, right? So I am actually amazed in terms of how quickly things are evolving. And this is what I was expecting to happen a couple years ago when I started writing this book. I was thinking, I better write this soon, because we're going to run out of time if we don't do something by the time these kind of changes, actually come to fruition. And I can see we are on that knee of the inflection point. And it's important for people in positions of leadership to really recognize that and do the right things So that's kind of so that's what prompted me to write this book, and I'm glad that it's actually coming out at this time, because now people will actually listen because they can also see the beginning of that.
An expert everybody is mentioning is Elon Musk, and he said last week AI will probably be smarter than any humans next year. By 2029, AI is probably smarter than all humans combined. What do you think? Is he right?
I think we're close. I think we're close, and it also depends on how you define smart, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I if you say, can it be smarter than every human in terms of, one device understanding more information than any human? Absolutely. I think by next year, even by probably today, the current level, Class 3 GPT-4 is probably smarter in the sense of it knows more things than any human on Earth. But when you say, can it maybe do all the things that any human can do? I think we're still any individual human can do. We're probably still a little bit a ways from that. And when humans work in teams, they definitely are able to do more than they can on an individual basis. But a lot of times, actually, real breakthroughs come from individual humans that see things that other people cannot see.
Yeah.
So, and they saw it because of certain backgrounds that they have. And I think this is where it actually excites me, because I think we, at least up to today, we haven't seen any of the AI systems create real breakthroughs in terms of a new theory of science or math or solving some major world problem. But I think we will get there soon, because it will be able to make connections and see things that no human can do. Maybe something that we learned in archaeology from 100 years ago becomes useful in solving a mathematical or a scientific problem of tomorrow, right? But usually people who study archaeology are not the physicists or the engineers of today, right? So I mean, I think those are the types of or things between biology and computer science or neuroscience or things like that. I would like that to happen, because I think we will be able to use these kind of breakthroughs to solve long-term problems that's been plaguing humanity. And once we do that, we get to kind of later part in the book is the concept of much higher productivity and a much more abundant society, which then becomes the root of solving some of the core issues that have created conflict, between humans for thousands of years. So
you say, well, personal in your book, why that we should embrace AGI and not fear it. But why should we do that?
yeah, so I think it's very natural to fear something that in some ways is more powerful than you, right? Or more intelligent than you. Because people say, oh, look at what happened when the Spanish went to South America, or when the British came to America and they destroyed the indigenous, or, when the British went to Australia, right? Where you have a less, educated population or less technologically advanced population, humans tend to want to conquer and take from a source that gives them value. Now, I think that's because humans have evolved in a scarcity minded environment for essentially in the history of our society, where our genes are programmed to try to get enough to sustain ourselves. Just like right now, we live actually, for at least in most first world countries, we live in a place where we have plenty of food, but because of that, of our history, when we see sweets and when we see tasty food, and people overeat, and especially in America, the obesity is actually a real major issue, where 30 or 40% of people are designated as being obese. And so, we, even though we know it's not healthy, we still do these things, right? And so, because it's programmed in our genes. Whereas with these machines, it doesn't have those genetic algorithms that are telling it that, oh, when you see food, you have to eat more, because you may not have food tomorrow, because that's what our genes told us, right? Whereas it will actually say, oh, and according to all the research that we've seen, eating at 80% of being full, it actually makes you healthier, makes you live longer, exercising a little bit more, so it would know that the understanding the logic, and just in that way, it will also have because it knows history, and it knows that, you know, when you conquer societies, when you oppress people, it creates revolutions, it creates negative outcomes. It will take that information and say, oh, you know, when I have this resources, rather than, you know, oppressing the people that are less technologically advanced, maybe I should share some technology with them and then help them advance, and that creates overall welfare, right? Overall satisfaction. And I think that's the perspective that we should be thinking, is that we usually it is the lesser educated people that uses aggression as the way of gaining power. And you know, I think in my talk I mentioned to you, I read the biographies of the best 10 and the most authoritative leaders, and the 10 worst most authoritative leaders of the last 100 years, and I did a comparison with them. And then what I found was that the the biggest factor that contributed to which were the successful ones that people really respected and admired, and which were authoritative ones, was a level of education and the amount of pursuit of lifelong learning. And there will be no other I guess, system that will have known as much information as what we will create very soon with these large language or large multimodal or future AGI systems than have ever existed. And it is usually the most knowledgeable, most wisest humans, the older ones, who are the most gentle, the most compassionate, the most considerate, because they've seen all the bad things that can happen when you do rash, aggressive things. Right. So I'm actually very looking forward to us getting to that point where we have a fairly all-knowing system that can either guide or educate our leaders, or at some point maybe even replace some of the leaders that in our current governments, because it will actually do a better job. At least in the US, of the two presidential choices right now, I would rather have, you know, an AI system being in their role than the current leadership, or the, you know, maybe the leadership that will be there in November. So so that's why I'm less fearful. The thing I am actually more fearful in between is when we have that immature system that has superpowers and knows a lot of things, can answer almost everything, but it's being directed by bad humans. It's being directed by selfish humans who want to use it for personal gain. Right. That's the part that I think we are headed into right now, because what we see is there's, you know, probably 10 to 100 companies that are trying to be the first to generate this AGI, you know, and every country now is fighting to be the first to own this AGI technology. And you have, you know, just a week or 2 weeks ago, you had Jensen Huang that said every country needs a sovereign AI, because, you know, you need to, you know, have your own data in there so that you can control the future. It sounds good. It sounds good in principle, but it's actually the exact opposite thing we need to do. Right? Because what that will do is that rather than sharing data, so we have one pool that takes into the perspectives of the history and culture and understanding of every single country in the world and every single culture, we actually create silos of information that creates an us and a them. And when you create an us and them, you automatically create conflict. You automatically create a separation between humans. And that will say that, oh, well, you know, based on what I know, I've been oppressed by this group. So in the future, I need to defend against them. I need to wipe them out when I get this power. And that would be the advice that the system gets, because it saw that, you know, over the last 100 years or 50 years or 1,000 years, it has been oppressed by this other group. Right. Or you know, it needs to gain its advantage. And so rather than doing that, if we look at it from a holistic perspective, if we pull together all of the history and culture and literature and the experts of the world, we will have a much more complete picture of the world and see that at the end of the day, there are no good guys and there are no bad guys. We are all humans. We are all fighting to survive. We are all fighting to get a piece of the resource to allow our in-group to survive. But once we understand that the in-group is not a country or a religion or a city, you know, the in-group is actually the humans versus the harsh reality of the universe we live in, then we will actually say, oh, well, let's pool all that knowledge and find out that how can we make all humans flourish. In fact, how can we make all life flourish, right? That should be the goal, versus making, you know, one religion or one country flourish. Right. I think that's the issue. The other problem that we've seen right now is because every single country and all these companies are buying up all the compute, everybody says, oh, there's not enough compute. This is why, NVIDIA stock is going, up the ceiling, because everybody's trying to fight to have, again, a limited resource. What we should be doing instead of what Mark Zuckerberg just said, oh, I just bought 100,000 H100s, so nobody else can have it for a while because I have them all, right? That's the wrong idea. I think it should be, how can all the countries in the world put their resources together, bring together all the smartest humans in the world, have all the compute that's available, and then create a solution that is truly thinking for the good of humanity, and then share that result with everybody. Because once we have that, once we make it where everybody's pulling it together, we will be able to take the result and make everybody's life better, right? And then we get to a point where we don't have to fight for that resource, because we will have all we need to eat. We will have, in fact, today we already have all we need to eat. The problem is a lot of the food is wasted. A lot of it is lost in transportation or whatever, right? If we have the intelligence to do these things, if we have the intelligence to create much better cleaner energy. Let's say, right now with our limited human brains, we are almost getting to ability to make fusion happen, right? If we can make fusion a reality where we have clean energy, the water in this cup can last me multiple lifetimes in terms of energy, right? Then I don't have to worry about, whether or not I should be traveling, or whether or not I can turn salt water into drinkable water, or whether or not I can irrigate this land so I can feed the people in this desert area, right? All of those issues can go away, because we will create a form of energy that can turn any medium or any material into another material, right? I think that's something that we underestimate the value of, and we really need to change the mindset of being in a scarcity-minded environment to being in an abundant-minded environment. When we change that perception, that basic assumption, most of the conflicts that are in the world goes away. Because do we need that oil in that certain place? Probably not. Do we need that particular land so that we can go and worship something? Maybe if you want to worship it, but you could also use XR technology to create 100 copies of that and have that same feeling, so that you are immersed in an environment where you go to a certain place, right? So I feel like we need to we need to get away from that basic assumption of we have to fight for something, we have to fight for the resource. We need to get into an assumption that the more we cooperate, the better the world gets. Not that the more we fight, the better our world gets, our own little world gets, right? That's a mindset that needs to change.
We are heading to AGI, and the next step after AGI is tell us ASI. ASI stands for artificial
superintelligence. Yeah, I mean, and the terminology is not particularly important, and honestly, I think once we get to AGI, getting to ASI will be a very quick process, right? Some people may argue and say, oh, this could take years, but if we see historically how quickly machines, once it learns to train itself, how quickly it can grow, we will be able to get to an ASI solution. I would say within maybe weeks to months. Some people would say days, versus some people are saying decades, maybe 10 years or 20 years from AGI, you'll get the ASI. And because the reality is that when you have a self-improving system that is working at the speed of light, that has the compute of all of the computational capabilities that we've created, and they will be able to pull it together, the speed of progress of a few days will be like our progress over thousands of years, right? So I don't think we want to underestimate how quickly that will happen. So this is why it's actually very important for us to cooperate, because whoever gets to that AGI first, if that AGI is trained on a biased, limited set of information, and it continues to learn from a biased bad actor, then that becomes a superpower that could lead to the it is real existential risk for humanity, right? Because that could be used to oppress the rest of society. It could be used to create a weapon that accidentally goes off, or create a germ that accidentally wipes us off, right? Or maybe it was trying to do something good. Let's say it was trying to get rid of rats or get rid of some other pest. And then all of a sudden that spreads into something that we didn't understand, right? So we really need to make sure that more people are involved in this, so that it really has a complete perspective rather than a naive understanding of the world.
Is it possible that when ASI was founded, or is there, that we have the feeling of ants and chimps, that there is something, a higher power, and they are below the power and live like them? You told me once, we are not concerned that we can't walk or run as fast as a car, that we can't play chess. We say, okay, let's play against each other, but not against a computer. So that we have a superpower and we live very well below. You are not concerned. You were very optimistic about it.
Yeah, so I think we discussed it a little bit in Austin. Is essentially we're going to go through multiple phases, right? Right now we are in the phase of the next couple of years. We're in the phase where we are using this technology as a tool. It's going to help increase our productivity, right? And within the next 5 years, when we get the AGI, it will be able to do most of the things that we do. It will liberate us, so that when we don't have a job, it's not a bad thing. When we don't have a job, it's a great thing, because it means that now we can go pursue arts and science and learn music and travel and do other things that we think brings us fulfillment and happiness, right? Now, the next phase is when it goes into the ASI phase, where it goes beyond us. A lot of people are afraid of that, because they're saying, look, it's going to be smarter than us. We've been the apex animal on this earth for, let's say 10, 20,000 years, something on that order, right? We don't want to give up that position. If you think about it, we are in that position, but we're not going out there and trying to kill all the other animals. There are a lot of people that are trying to say, how can we increase biodiversity? How can we preserve this area so that more life can survive? Right? There are the more intelligent people, the more compassionate people actually want to increase the life and the diversity of the world. I think we will get to that point with this next generation being, and when it becomes more capable than us, we should be looking at it as, this is our descendant, this is our children. And just like if my child went to she went to a good school, she now got a good job, I think in, let's say, 5 or 10 years, she exceeds my accomplishments in work, in life, in impact. I would be so proud of her. I'd be saying, oh, look what she's done, right? I think all of us would have that feeling. And if we look at them, at these new intelligence, as, oh, look at our children, look at what our descendants have created, I think it will change our perspective. Instead of looking at this, look at something that's competing with us. They are not competing with us. They are going to be at a different plane. Just like you said, to them, we will be at a chimp or a dog or maybe an ant level intelligence. And even if we try, our hardware, our meat machine, is something that has not changed for 100,000 years, right? So how can we expect that, with all of this new materials and new technology that's developed over the last, couple of hundred years with our technologies, that we can compete against that level of intelligence? We should not be trying to compete against it. We should be trying to say, how can we make that happen? And then how can we make sure that when that happens, it remembers us as its ancestors, and it takes care of us, just like in Asian culture. And I come from an Asian culture where we have a lot of respect for our elderly. We bring them into our home. We treat them with care. We make sure we nurture and keep them healthy, right? Whereas a lot of Western society these days, it goes the other way, where as soon as a person gets old, you put them into a retirement home, you keep them away, you less trouble, let the nurses take care of them, right? I think if we change our mindset of passing on this more Eastern mindset to our AI prodigy, I think when it grows up, it will remember us as its ancestors, and it will respect and care for us, and it will want us to be healthy and well, just like we want our parents to be healthy and well.
Mm-hmm. We are looking to the year 2034. And do you think that superintelligence and spatial computing will unleash an age of abundance, as you have mentioned before, that we have it in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, some of it will happen faster, but the real issue is what do we do in between? Because
Yeah.
as these jobs get displaced, as these people start to lose purpose, because so many humans right now attach their purpose, their identity to their work, right?
Mm.
If 30, 40, 50, 60% of our population no longer have work and they don't have a replacement purpose, they will be on the streets. They will create havoc, right? Just like
Mm.
if you look at all these countries where people have very, very high employment, they will be issues on the streets. So this is why, first of all, we need to make sure we take care, the governments need to come together and take care of the basic needs of these humans so that they at least have their food and shelter and clothing taken care of. Now the question is, now what do you do to replace their sense of purpose if they no longer have work?
Mm.
This is why I think the immersive technologies can play a bigger role, because when you have when we can create that metaverse that was talked about a few years ago, something that is an interoperable, interconnected global network 3D worlds, right? Where you have essentially every single website in the world, there's hundreds of millions of websites. If we turn those into hundreds of millions of worlds, where people can go and explore and learn and grow and interact with each other, and maybe have use that as a supplemental either form of income or at least a form of purpose. I think that helps to alleviate uh, the part of the problem. It may not alleviate all the problem, a part of the problem that will be associated with having mass displacement of work. Right? If we can solve that problem, then we will get to that abundance. We will, because it will take time for the physical world to adjust to this change. The digital intelligence will happen faster. The transition to digital intelligence of super or general intelligence will happen much faster than the transition for the physical world to adapt to that change. That's the part that I really hope the policymakers and the corporate leaders keep into account. So, in fact, I just saw yesterday Bernie Sanders put out a proposal for the U.S. to move from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. Um, I actually think it's not a bad idea, and they'll probably, even if it passes, it'll take a while for it to pass. But the fact that we can still keep people in some labor, some form of labor, even if it's less time, but now they still at least have a sense that I still have work, I'm still contributing to the world, and I still have income, even though I'm more productive because of these new technologies. So I actually am creating more in less time, but I still don't have the issue of being fired. Right. So I mean, I think a lot of Europe already has this type of mentality. The U.S. is not is not that way, right? So I would hope that the U.S. can learn from some of the things that are happening in Europe over the last few decades of more of a social welfare system to ensure that the general health and wellness of its population is taken care of.
Mm. You told us that people will go to the street, maybe young people who do not find a job because they studied something which is old or which does not exist anymore when they are finished. And there are other people in the 50s that they have lost their job because there are not any more accountant needed and other jobs.
Yes.
And what do you think before coming to paradise? There will be something like a war, or the historian Noah Harari told us that he believes that to come to the new age before we get there, there are times which we do not like. Like now we have seen, or we see war in Ukraine, we see war is in a lot of places, and we thought, or I thought, we will overcome this situation, but no, it's back.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't want to see it happen, but I think based on history and human nature, we will need to probably have some major negative catastrophe for the world to wake up, for the leadership to wake up, to fight against their their nature of preserving power, of preserving their position in the world. That just like what happened with, we have seen cooperation on a global scale, things like the nuclear non-proliferation treaties, right? So, over the last 80 years, we have not used these, and we haven't had more than, a handful of countries that have this technology, because we saw the devastation that can happen when you actually put it onto a country, right? Or you drop something onto a population. We also have the chemical weapons kind of treaties, because we saw what happened during World War One, and the devastation that can happen. I hope that in this case we will actually be able to come to some of these global agreements before something bad happens. I would say it's maybe 50-50. Hopefully the leaders today are more enlightened than they were, a few decades ago, or a century ago. But I don't know, because I don't think human nature have changed enough. And unfortunately, today's people in power today are more focused on their maintaining power than they are on really bringing good to the people that they serve. And so I feel like until something bad happens, it doesn't have to be a global aspect. It could be a local catastrophe that then wakes people up, right? So we have seen things like the Autonomous Weapon Act that the US put out, where now they're saying, hey, let's not have autonomous, well, actually that's more of a global treaty now, where people are saying not have completely autonomous weapons that are going and being self-directed. So we have seen that level of cooperation. Or even the genetic, human genetic engineering type of restrictions, so that we're not going and making cloned humans and editing our genes that can go into the gene pool. So in some ways we have seen it over the last couple of decades, a little more sanguine feel of how to solve some of these problems without a catastrophe happening. So it gives me hope. But I think this does take a certain level of awareness, because the temptation of being the first to own this new superpower is something that I think very few governments and very few companies will resist or can resist.
But how high is the percentage that we will see a third world war? What do you think? 50%, 60%?
Well, I'm not a geopolitical expert, so I don't know if I'm here. I should answer that question, but I think it's it is a significant number. It's a non insignificant number probability of that happening, and it could also not necessarily be a world war. It could just be a particular catastrophe of some sort that happens. It could be an AI that creates a bioweapon that is released accidentally. It could be an AI that creates a cyber weapon that takes down the global power infrastructure, whatever, right? So I don't know, but I think it will take some level of catastrophe, and it may or may not mean a world war. Right?
We talk about the politicians who have to help us, who have to go to support, to protect us, because if it is going very fast, it will hurt us a lot. So we need some protection, that it takes a lot of time, that we get adjusted to the new situation. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's the key, is that if we give ourselves enough time and we allow that transition to happen at a pace, from a physical transition to happen at a pace that society can withstand, versus the pace that technology wants to go. Right. Now, I think the technology can continue to accelerate, and that is inevitable, because that's what has happened over the last 100 years or more. Actually, over the last thousands of years, we are now something like 10,000 times more productive than we were 10,000 years ago. So it is a significant increase, and that increase happened, most of it, over the last 200 years. Right. So it will accelerate naturally, but the thing is, how can we allow the physical systems to accommodate that progress at a pace that does not break the system?
We talk about the different roles, and tell us a little bit about the major companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple, who dominates this field right now. What is the role in the future?
I think right now they play an important part of determining where things go, because if they, in some ways, they are acting as almost de facto countries, in the sense of, some companies like Meta has 3 billion members or users, bigger than any country in the world, right? If they are using this technology and this information to influence their population of audience, it could create a very good outcome, or it could create a very bad outcome. So right now they're using it actually to maximize screen time and maximize engagement, which means that the more aggressive information you put in, the more that you create hate. That actually right now the algorithm sees that it maximizes engagement, and to them that's a good thing. To the world, it's probably not a good thing. So I think there's a high responsibility for companies like a Meta or a Google or a Apple or a Microsoft or an Amazon, these kind of companies, to really think about their role in this world, and including some of the global companies as well, not just these US giants, but Tencent or ByteDance or whatever. It seems like Europe doesn't have as big of these kind of global conglomerates, but I think the problem is that if these companies are still profit driven, if their motive is to maximize profits, we will go down a dark road, because maximizing profits near term is not consistent with doing good long term, unfortunately. So there are people who are saying, hey, if these systems are now AGI, we should nationalize them, because at least then it's under the governmental control that has more a purpose of serving the good of its people. But even when you nationalize it, you are serving the good of a particular country's people, not in a global population, right? Yeah. So this gets us back to the other issue that we talked about earlier, of these sovereign AIs. So I think France wants their own, China wants their own. I was in Saudi Arabia just 2 weeks ago, and they want to make their own. So I really want us to think higher, to think at a higher level, so that we are not competing to be first. We are competing all to come in at the finish line at the same time. Because if we compete to be first, we'll all be running off of the edge of a hill, right? Off of a cliff. Because whoever goes first will be so tempted by having that power, they will use it. When they use it, then everybody else will feel oppressed, and they will fight back, and they just creates this kind of reinforcing negative loop that will take us down a very, very dark and long path.
What do you mentioned China? You lived a long time in China. You came from China, yes, I think 6 months ago. So what is the role from China in this game, in this play?
Well, China right now is probably the #2 player in the world in terms of the AI space. And, they have some of the, I guess, the largest technical companies as well in that space. They also have a lot of government resource that is being put into helping to equalize it with the US, especially after the last couple of years, or last probably 4 or 5 years, where the US has created specific targeted bans to restrict the technical growth of China. Its response is saying, okay, I need to be completely independent. I need to have my own semiconductor capabilities. I need to have my own, AI engineers. I need to have my own telecom systems. I need to have, rather than creating a united global front, we are now actually bifurcating the world into more and more separate worlds, where we're decoupling, and that decoupling creates a enhanced sense of an us and them, of a good guy versus bad guy. Everybody thinks they're the good guy, and everybody else is the bad guy. And so when everybody thinks that way, they put up defenses, they put up walls, and they try to slow down the other guy. And if you look at the data right now, half of the Chinese educated AI engineers are actually going internationally to feed the world's AI population. In fact, if you look at the top engineers, and report just came out, I just saw yesterday. It shows something like 42% of top tier AI engineers in the US is actually from Chinese origin. Right? That's a very large portion,
Yeah.
And so if you have all of these, smart Chinese people, why don't we bring them together with all these smart Americans and all these smart Germans and all these smart Indians and put them into a joint effort to do it instead of everybody fighting to create essentially a weapon. Because right now, what they are, everybody talks about the Manhattan Project. They want to be the Manhattan Project of AI. I think that is completely wrong in terms of the perspective, because the Manhattan Project is how can I create a bomb faster than the other person can create a bomb? That was the history of the Manhattan Project. We need to create an Apollo project. How can we get to the moon? How can we get to a very difficult to arrive at location that brings the world forward, faster? Even though the Apollo project was a US project, after it was done, the technology spread to the rest of the world, right? So there was things that came out of that when, all those resources was put into creating something that was not destructive. The Manhattan Project created something that was destructive. The Apollo project created something that increased the curiosity of the world, that united the world. When the world looked and saw a human land on the moon and walk there, everybody said, "Oh, we can now explore beyond our space. We are now, part of a non-planetary fixed society." Right? I think that actually something that is quite powerful, and we should be doing that type of investment versus the how do we create something destructive? Because whenever we create something destructive, we will use it. I think it was Einstein. He said, "I don't know what weapon the Third World War will be using, but the fourth one will be using sticks and stones." And I think he has the right idea here, right? If we create another world war, if we go down that dark path, we will probably have enough power to set us back hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And that is not an outcome that I think anybody wants, right? So I hope we don't get into this race condition, which we are on right now, of turning AI into a weapon. We should be turning AI into a doorway into the future, right? Something that is creating new possibilities for us versus limiting the possibilities of other people that surround us.
So you see the trends, you see the movement that we are right now going in the path that there will be AI as a weapon. Is it for you sure? We can't understand you. Wait.
There are already multiple companies right now working on AI as a weapon. Right? There are and all the governments want to create their sovereign AI, so that they're saying, if I don't make it, then other person will, right? If the US doesn't make it, China will. If China doesn't make it, Russia will. Whatever, right? Everybody is seeing it as, here is a tool that I will use that makes my country superior. And when you see it that way, it is a weapon, right? Because intelligence is a superpower. If I can solve a problem before you can, and I can use it against you, then it is a weapon. Yeah.
I understand very well. No, yeah, I think the tone. Last two or three questions. I can understand you.
Yes,
what is the role of Europe? We do not have anything of that. We do not have Apple. We do not have Tencent, Baidu. Well, how do you see the role of Europe in this game?
I actually think that Europe plays a very important role, because if you look at what Europe has done, since 1940, in the 40, to see that it has united as a common region, even though they came from disparate languages, disparate religions, this disparate history that used to be in conflict for thousands of years. To be able to come together as a united front, I think that shows that it is possible for people with different backgrounds to come together for a common good. And if we can take that spirit of what Europe has done and spread it out to the rest of the world, I think that would actually help us to land at a better outcome than what is happening today, right? Whether China or US, they are both on a race condition because they want to be first, because China wants to catch up with the US, because if you look on a per capita GDP basis, it's probably 3 or 4x less than the US. They wants to have the quality of life of the US. The US feels like any country that is catching up to me in terms of total global GDP, they are a threat to my hegemony in the world. And so I need to pull them back, right? And the two forces are creating the situation now where we had essentially a lot of people, a lot of the world reducing their military spend. Now defense spending is starting to go back up again. And we are heading in the wrong direction. We should be taking that defense spending, or really more offense spending, and turn it into things, into healthcare, into education, into a more broader social safety net, which Europe has been a great example of. A lot of people, I lived in China, I lived in the US, and people say, oh, Europe is so slow and they're not progressing and so forth. But in a lot of ways, Europe has some of the happiest people in the world, the most satisfied, because they have a quality of life. They prioritize quality of life over productivity or progress, right? Because they've actually already arrived at a quality of life that is quite satisfactory. Whereas China still wanted to catch up, and US just wanted to maintain its lead in the world, and they have a different drive. Whereas I think that the priority long term, when we get to an abundant society, the priority of the European people actually is probably more accurate than the priority of either China or the US today, right? The US wants to control, and they have 800 military bases around the world because they want to have control over the kind of the global global geopolitical arena. China just wants to catch up and regain its place in the world that it had for hundreds of years before the 1900s. It was the number one country in the world. It had probably 30-40% of the global GDP. Now starting to get back to a position where people are starting to respect it again. For 100 years, people were essentially taking advantage of this country, and it felt like it didn't have its rightful place, right? So it's trying to regain a level of respect. So, but and I think in India is also the same thing. They're trying to come out of 100 years of colonialism into a place where it also has a rightful place. I think for before China, actually India was actually the number one GDP country in the world for also a few hundred years, right? So we really need to see that every country, every region before that, like the Middle East was also very, very important, right? So we really need to see that everybody all belong to the same larger group rather than trying to compete against the present groups that we've created. All the countries that we have today, very few of them have actually been here for more than a few hundred years, right? So these separations are all artificial, that we've created these separations of what countries mean and what governments mean. And so why do we need to separate them? We look down underneath of us, we are like 99.9% the same as everybody else on the earth. So there's nothing that really separates us. Even though on the outside we may have different color hair or different color skin, it doesn't matter. In the underneath, our genetic code is almost exactly
basically the same. Yeah. Last question about the health and medicine and our medical code. What is the impact of our new future about health and medicine? What does it mean for our health?
Well, I mean, this is something that actually I am also very hopeful for, is that many experts are saying, aging and dying is actually a disease. It's actually something that can be cured, right? I'm not sure if I really want to live forever. I would want people in power to live forever, because what we've seen that in the past, even when you live in a country that's being oppressed by authoritarian, at some point they will pass away and they will be replaced by something. If you have leaders that can live forever, we are in a bad situation, it may actually perpetuate a bad situation. Now, in terms of total welfare, I think it's great because so many people are having suffering because of illness in the world. So if we can reduce illness, we can reduce disease, we can reduce cancer, people will have a much longer health span versus I actually I'm more supportive of increasing health span than I am of increasing lifespan. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, I want to live 500 years. You know what? I don't know if that's a good thing. I would rather say, hey, if everybody can live to 120 years, but that 120 years is all healthy, you can be active, you can go anywhere in the world, you can go see everything, you can learn, explore. I think that's enough. And the other issue is when you can live too long, people actually decide they want to have less kids. So there's no kind of next generation. What we see in most advanced society is the higher the quality of living, the higher the income level, the lower the childbirth rate, right? And most developing nations, we actually don't have a replacement rate for birth, and that's a negative thing, particularly in places like Japan or Korea or Singapore. They're actually paying people to have kids because they're not having enough kids. So if you can live 500 years, then you're probably going to have even less kids because you're saying, why do I want to spend all my time taking care of kids? I want to live life for 499 years and then I'll think about it. So I think we will definitely get to a point where our health will be better. I'm still hesitant to see what we should do in terms of perpetuating the lifespan of humans. So, but I think it will be possible. It will be done. But the other thing is that also maybe creates a greater gap between the rich and the poor, because probably for us to perpetuate our lifespans, we will probably need to get into genetic engineering, and genetic engineering will be much more accessible to the wealthy nations in the world. And that again, not only do we have now more money between the rich and the poor, more wealth, we will also have more life, right? That or at least more duration of life. I think that's probably not a positive outcome unless we can do it where we allow that to be shared again to a greater population so that we don't create the gap. Because as we know in the past, whenever there's a significant gap between the rich and the poor, between the haves and the have-nots, we create conflict. And that conflict eventually becomes a revolution. And that revolution would create a transition of power. And in the middle, it also ends with a lot of suffering, right? So I think to avoid that type of an outcome, spreading and sharing between the rich and the poor countries, between the developed and undeveloped countries, will actually create more long-term good than it will if you hoarded it with just the developing countries. So I think we need to get to a place of have and have nots to a have and have soon. So that will allow people to say, okay, maybe if I don't have this technology today, maybe I don't have a headset I can wear to get into an immersive world. At least I can get into this 3D world with my phone, which most people in the world have. And then very soon I can get into the 3D world with a tablet, which soon most people will have. And then I can get into a 3D world with these glasses. So as we get to these places, and same with once you have a phone, you have access to essentially all the AI systems out there. You can have a one-to-one tutor that will know everything, right? As long as it's trained properly, it is not biased towards any one culture or any one country, then I think that AI teacher will be the best teacher that has ever existed. And it will bring the quality of education in the world up into a very, very high place. And when that happens, the more educated we are, the more we actually able to actually execute a democracy, a global democracy, right? Because when people are not educated, a democracy does not work. It only works when everybody's educated, because then they can make decisions that are right, that are informed. Whereas today, if you have a pseudo democracy in a place where people are not educated, then they're just being controlled and manipulated by whoever's at the top. That perpetuates their position of power, right? So maybe I'm just rambling now. So but I do think health is something that we will solve. and people, if we can live past the next 10 or 20 years, then we should have a very high probability for a healthy long rest of our lives that could naturally go to 120. At least that this is based on current research out there, is that 120 seems to be the physical limit that we have if we don't do genetic engineering.
So we have a lot of time for more interviews in the future, because there's 40 years, 50 years left. And thank you very much, Alvin W. Graylin, for this wonderful conversation. We have missed something? No, I think we have talked about everything which is important for your book, and which is important for us, for our visitors, for our readers, for our partners. And so if you have any questions, send me an email, and we see you soon in maybe in Europe, in Germany, and then we have to talk to other subjects, and we have to do a deep dive. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you in person again soon. So thank you, Jens, for inviting me. And this has been a very fun conversation. And thank you for taking time to read the book and for sharing the messages.
Thank you, Alvin, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.